Hello, and welcome to episode 23 of the God Cells podcast. I'm Eric Merola. Today, I speak to Max, who has taken his son to M-Cell not once, not twice, but 3 times since the Russian invasion began. Max and his son will return later this year in 2025 for their 4th trip. Today, Max's son Asa is 9 years old. Asa was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, which originally brought Max to M-Cell in Kyiv, Ukraine, to seek fetal stem cell therapy for his son, Asa. An interesting part of this conversation was learning that Asa's father, Max, decided to try this therapy for himself for his diagnosis of Crohn's disease. This podcast is the first podcast I've done involving a cerebral palsy patient or a Crohn's disease patient. I try my best to make each podcast about a new ailment or reason for seeking fetal stem cell therapy than other podcasts. I hope you enjoy today's podcast with Max.
Hello.
Hello, Max.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you today?
I've been hustling around trying to get the boys all preoccupied.
How many boys do you have?
I have 2 identical twins.
Okay.
Well, Asa, he has cerebral palsy.
Right.
Time that they were born, he was the fragile one.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got him out there. I've got an old cell phone with no SIM card.
Okay.
But it works on the Wi-Fi. I give it to him and he watches cartoons, or at least he starts off watching cartoons, and he always ends up watching Stephen Colbert.
That is hilarious. I love that.
I don't know why, but he just really likes Stephen Colbert. He's just taken with him.
Is it like old Stephen Colbert from Comedy Central days or new Stephen Colbert, like late night?
Late night.
Okay, all right.
They've got those short video clips.
Yep.
And he'll work his way through them, and he knows how to make it back up, make it go forward. He'll just sit there and listen to Stephen Colbert for literally hours if I let him.
Remind me his age again?
He's 9.
Okay. That is kind of amazing because Stephen Colbert, even though he is funny, it tends to be like high intellectual humor. And I think that's great that a 9-year-old is watching and enjoying Stephen Colbert.
And his mother, who we would consider to be normal, is not even interested. That's what I've often wondered who's ahead of whom. But Cyrus is in there. I've got him with an iPad. I can't hand Asa the iPad. If he destroys my old cell phone, I can live with, but the iPad, can't let him do that.
Of course. By the way, today, I hope it doesn't happen. I have the windows open in my place, and there's big protests planned like a few blocks from me today. And they're supposed to start, I don't know, maybe right about now for the next hour and a half, we are told. So I don't know. Hopefully we won't get interrupted because I lived through the George Floyd protests. Ooh, and as I look out the window, I do see security on roofs. Fascinating. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to digress here, but yeah.
We're all expecting these to occur. Now, they're not going to occur out where I'm at, but I keep up with the news, and I'm hoping that everything will go peacefully.
Yeah, as do I. Not to get too far down the subject, but yeah, no, we were here, I live in Santa Monica, and we were sort of ground zero for the George Floyd protests, which devolved into mass looting and chaos. And with helicopters overhead all night, couldn't sleep. It was just insanity. And we're just, and we also just dealt with the Palisades fires. Not that that was the same thing. So
that was a disaster.
Yeah, we're only a few miles from the Palisades, or Santa Monica. But anyway, so yeah, hopefully we'll not get interrupted while we talk today.
Well, my brother used to live in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
He did for over 30 years.
Okay.
And I've been out to visit him 4 or 5 times. Stay for a week and go home. In some ways, it was fun to go visit, but Los Angeles is humongous.
It is. And I will say, like, I'm going to stop you for a moment because I feel the same way. Because I moved here from Manhattan, from New York City. And growing up, or not growing up, I did not grow up in New York City. I moved there in my very early 20s and I lived there for about 13 years and then went from there to here. But it's interesting, everybody in New York, and a lot of East Coasters, if you would, because I'm from North Carolina originally, from Winston-Salem.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And a lot of East Coasters are very anti-LA, just in general. And, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm fortunate, my wife and I are fortunate where we live in Santa Monica. It is a part of LA, but it's a small little village of about 65,000 people. We're near the ocean. I'm fortunate enough to work from home. My wife's clients that she works for are very close by. So we don't have to deal with the LA chaos of the traffic and all the usual chaos you see on the news. So we're very fortunate in that regard, except for fires sometimes.
Yeah, my brother went to California, what is it, the university there.
University of Southern California, USC?
Yes, he graduated second in his class in mathematics.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. He's the smart one in the family. I always tell people that I am the least of my family.
Well.
That way I don't have to sit there. I've never been interested in thumping on my chest, so, I just pass it off on him.
Okay. I suppose there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Well, while it's not thumping on your chest, I have to say, like, it takes a lot of courage to go take your child to Ukraine for this therapy. It takes a lot of courage to do it. A lot of people don't have the courage to do that, And so I think you should be very proud of yourself. And
my brother's never been outside the United States.
Aha.
I'm trying my best to convince him that he needs to go to Ukraine. He's extremely cautious because of the political situation there and the war.
Sure.
I'm trying to convince him that he can get in and get out without consequence.
Because you can. I mean, frankly, when I first went there in 2016, it had only been a couple of years since the annexation of Crimea. And even then I was, and also, of course, I'd never been to Ukraine. I had spent a lot of time traveling the world. I'd been to China and Japan and all over Europe and much of Eastern Europe, but never Ukraine. And I was extremely nervous my first trip, even before, this war, when we actually could fly into Kyiv, before the airspace was closed. So I understand where he's coming from, especially if he's never been outside the country. It can be very daunting because he just doesn't know, right? He just doesn't know.
He just doesn't know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there's that awkwardness of stepping into a situation where you don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
Now, I've traveled a bunch. I've been to Italy and Switzerland and France and England, and I've been in and out of mainland China about 8 times.
Wow.
And, down to South America, into Peru. I like to travel.
Me too. Oh, let's talk about China for a minute, because I've only been once. I was there for a couple of weeks. I was in Guangzhou. I think it's where, like, the iPhone factories, or one of them are, where they had the nets around it.
Guangzhou is a medium-sized city in China.
Yeah. I mean, that's all I know. I've only been there. I was working on a documentary that I never actually decided to finish, but it brought me there.
Guangzhou is what you'd call a medium-sized city in China. It's got over 20 million people.
Yeah, that's just medium-sized, right?
My wife is from a small city in China.
Oh, she is? Okay.
Yes. And it only has 7 million people.
That's still twice the size of, like, Brooklyn, Yeah.
Perspectives vary according to where you are.
Correct.
Yeah, I like to live out in the countryside. I grew up in a small town in northwest Florida. People say, "Where are you from?" And I'd go to the West Coast.
That is funny because it is, after all, its own little, because it is a peninsula, and I can see that. That's pretty funny. That's funny.
It has an East Coast and a West Coast.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But I ended up in Virginia. I came up here for the job and ended up liking it, and so I stayed.
It is a peaceful state. I've spent a lot of time in Roanoke and Danville. I had family there for years. I know
been many times in Roanoke, very many times. Roanoke's about 140 miles away.
Mm-hmm. Have you spent a lot of time there?
Well, I take my son over to the doctors in Roanoke.
What's the big lake in Roanoke? I spent a lot of time there. Smith Mountain, is that right?
No, Smith Mountain Lake.
Yeah,
yes.
Smith Mountain Lake. Yep. much of my childhood was spent on Smith Mountain Lake. My grandfather owned this old Civil War era house called the Holland Duncan House. No, it's fun to meet people from the part of the world or the country that I've spent a lot of my life running around. So, yeah.
I've been on your websites. I've been going in and off of your productions now for several years. I've seen your artwork.
Thank you. Let me ask you, before you continue, so you discovered me first with my work with fetal stem cells, correct? You weren't aware of my work back since 2010, 11, covering this one doctor and PhD biochemist treating people with his cancer therapy invention, or my whistleblower movie, or my banking movie. You found it with fetal, right?
That's the original way I found my way to you.
Okay.
I was looking away to. My son has cerebral palsy. He was the fragile one. He had 2 brain bleeds in both the left and right lateral ventricles in the floor, of the right lateral ventricles. And he was predicted to have a small head. And he was, have you seen children with cerebral palsy where their bodies have become twisted and deformed?
Of course, I have. And I know it's not the same, but I've spent a lot of time with children with muscular dystrophy. I know it's not identical, but it is in the same sort of family, if you would, as far as how they look at the sort of later stages. Yes, I have. And I've talked to a couple of cerebral palsy families that are from Eastern Europe, actually, kind of like with you. I didn't do a podcast, but I spoke some time on the phone with them. Yes, I'm very familiar. Yes.
And that was my son's predicted future, but I wasn't pleased with that. I had higher hopes for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't going to sit by idly and just take care of him and watch him live in a vegetative state for the rest of his life, because he was predicted to never be verbal. And, they outfitted me with all this equipment that, for a child that's pretty much in a vegetative state. And I just went, no.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be satisfied with this, and I'm not going to allow it to happen to my son if I can do anything to avoid it. And I started looking into stem cells. I did a lot of research, and I didn't know anything. And there's definitely a learning curve. Originally he was born in 2016, and in 2019, I cut a deal with an outfit out of China, out of Shenzhen,
okay,
which is a small city just off the edge of Guangzhou.
Okay.
And in China, this is the city of science. And someone tells you they're from Shenzhen, you go, oh my, are you a scientist or are you maintenance?
Right. The city I've heard 1,000 times in my various parts of life, studying innovative technologies, etc. But please keep going.
And so I have a visa. My wife is a Chinese citizen, and she's here on a green card. It took me 2 years to get her into the United States after our courtship is an interesting thing. But anyway, it took me 2 years to get her into the United States, to bring her in legal. I'm a retired inspector and geologist. I was going to do everything by the book, and I did. And it took me just shy of 2 years to get her here. I brought her in. She was very talented. I was disappointed in how she was treated when she got here. You'd have to be from the area, but I went with her to interviews, and they pulled that old routine about, honey, we're just not sure about the quality of your education.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they're afraid of a Chinese woman that can do math.
I do understand partially, even though my wife is not from China. My wife is from Poland, and we met in New York City. She was in her early 20s. I was around 30. I'm in my early 50s now, so we've been together for 20-some years now. But no, we dealt with a lot of immigration hell, if you would. And even though she's not from China or vice versa, but I understand. I have sympathy for what you went through, because we had to go through similar ridiculous scrutiny. Yeah, so I sympathize with you. Even though China, I know that China has a different stigma in the United States, just because of whatever. Yeah. What I'm saying is it took us a couple of years, too, to iron everything out. It wasn't an easy process at all. Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. There's a lot of things, a lot of requirements to fulfill. But I accomplished it. I'm an information person.
Sure. Which is every more reason why I love speaking to people like you, Max, because people that discover this therapy are usually people that have done their research. They don't walk into it blindly. Your child's therapy.
I've watched many. I haven't seen every video that you've made. Let's say I've seen many of them. And the thing is I was looking for a way to help my son.
Right.
And the outfit that I went to, I'm not going to mention their name because I'm not going to give them a plug.
No, don't do it.
I took my son there, and they had a small private hospital in Bangkok. Getting in and out of Thailand is a breeze. And so I took him there, and he was there for 23 days. They didn't work on Saturdays and Sundays, but they gave him stem cells every other day for 23 days. But it was the wrong kind of stem cells.
Right.
It was umbilical cord mesenchyme stem cells. I was not impressed with the result. There was one thing that it did do. His immune system responded.
Yep.
For the first 3 years of his life, I went to bed every night expecting to wake up to a corpse the next morning. He was that fragile. And I just picked him up, loaded him up, and I took him. He was still in a cradle type thing, and I got a travel chair to it. And I'd carry him on the plane and set him in his chair in the seat. And then I'd take it out and expand it and set it on that and strap him in. And I'd, haul him in and out. He was a piece of luggage. It was how I managed to get him around. We did the treatment, but his immune system did respond.
Yep.
And I ceased worrying about him dying on me. It was just a loss that I was not prepared to accept. But I knew that I could not return there because they could treat sports injuries.
Correct.
And their treatment for sports injuries was effective. But we're trying to repair a central nervous system. And what they're doing is not going to repair central nervous system damage. But I didn't know that.
Most people don't.
I've got several science degrees, and one of them is biology. But I'm not a doctor. But I know how to use a dictionary, and I know how to look things up, and I can read it. When I was a boy, I used to read some of my father's books. My father was a pathologist. One of the books that I remember reading, and I read the book multiple times, was The Physiological Basis of Pharmacology. It gave me a basis for looking into situations and trying to understand them. But anyway, I started branching out and trying to find something else. And, you go and you look at this outfit that's in Panama and the one that's in the Bahamas. And there's all, around the Caribbean. And I looked at some of the places that were in India and Europe, Western Europe. And then one day I came across one of your productions. And so I said, okay, let's look at Ukraine. And in November of 21, I sent an email to MCell. Then I started noticing stuff going on because I pay attention to the world situation. And I noticed that, and that was at the end of November. And then in December, the Russian troops were amassing along the Ukraine border. And I just said, we will pause. I knew where I wanted to be, but I'm not a soldier. I'm not willing to go off and fight a war. They invaded on, February the 22nd, 24th, somewhere along there.
22, you got it.
I went, we're going to put a pause. And I was just on the news every day watching. Then in the late summer, Ukraine did what I call the hard push. And they pushed Russia out of, 20 to 30% of the land that they had occupied.
Yep.
And I just looked at my wife and said, I'm going now. While the Russians are reeling, I'm getting in. Getting my son treated, then I'll get out.
We talked back then, right? You had communicated with me at this time, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Keep going. Please continue.
Anyway, I didn't know how to get there, so I did the best that I could. I have a friend in Atlanta, or actually she's north of Atlanta, and she's a travel agent, and she's gotten me in and out of China. She's gotten me in and out of South America. Now she's gotten me in and out of Europe 3 times. So I went on the internet and started looking for hotels and places to stay and all the other kinds of things. And I was trying to save money because I am not wealthy. I'm not even well-to-do. I could not take my wife with me because I could not travel with my other son due to his age. And I left him because there was a war going on. And my view into it at that time was if Asa and I become lost, it is not the end of my family. That was my view. I had no reason to have any better view of it. Doing what I did for a living, I've walked into some bad situations. I never had a gun or a badge, but I did enforcement. It's all in how you handle yourself. You own the ground you're standing on. And so I came up with a game plan, and I literally planned out every day. You've seen these sheets where it gives the 24 hours of the day, and I filled out multiple pages, one for each day that I was going to be on the road. I had a game plan. I knew where I was going to stay, where I was traveling from. But the first thing that I did was I tried to get train tickets, and I found Pole Rail. Not knowing anything about it, I got my train tickets in line to get me in and out of Kiev. And then once I had my train tickets, I got my hotel rooms in Warsaw and in Kiev. Then I got my plane tickets, the last thing I did. I laid it out, and I executed it. But the thing is I didn't make the best of choices for my travel. My first time, I got into Warsaw and then went down to the central train station and got on a train there. It ended up that I was the only man in that car.
Yep. Can I stop you just for a moment? Just for people listening, you were there 4 times. So I just want to kindly ask you to because this is your first of 4, correct?
We're getting ready to go back for the 4th time.
So you mentioned how you're the only man on the car, because I felt the same way, because it's all women and children because of the men are essentially fighting.
When the Ukrainians pushed the Russians back, a lot of the women and children that had fled the country just wanted to go home. When I got onto that car, it was a car full of women and children returning to Ukraine.
Yep, me too.
Of course, I took the least expensive tickets I could find, and that's where it put me. We rode from there to Helm, and at Helm we changed trains, and I got onto a car that had sleeper rooms. What do you call those? A compartment, but it held 4 people, and I found myself in the car with this young woman and her mother and their newborn child. It was less than a year old. We traveled together from Helm to Kiev. The young lady spoke English. Her mother did not. We talked a lot. Of course, I had an upper and lower bunk, and I just threw all my gear on the top bunk, and I put Asa up against the wall, and then I slept on the outside, so if anybody fell off the bed, it would be me, because it's not wide, you know that.
Sure.
And then in the morning when we got up, they brought us a cup of tea. I started talking to her, and we talked about various and sundry things. I had my iPad there. I showed them pictures of where I'm from, and I do photography. I showed them some of my photography, and they saw a picture of my father. And I said, yes, my father was in the military. He marched with Patton in 3rd Army. We had an interesting conversation, and I showed them the letter that MCell gives you to travel in and out of the country with. Are you familiar with that letter?
Of course. I've used the same letter myself 9 times. Of course I am. Yeah.
Anyway, and I told her I don't know what any of this is, and she explained it to me. She could actually read it. But anyway, we traveled together to Kiev, and then we all got off the train, and the driver from MCell met us at the train station. He loaded up, and he took us over to the hotel. We stayed at the Favor Park. Favor?
Favor Park. That's the one that's closest to the clinic. That's recommended. Yeah. Keep going. Yeah. I've been there once. By the way, I stayed there the first time at the end of 2022, in September 2022, because I, like everybody, it was the first year of the war. That's where me and my wife and people that decided to tag along with me stayed. So I'm familiar.
The hotel is a nice place. Their breakfast is just over the top, and the other meals are good too.
When you were there at Favorite Park, obviously you were limited because of ASA, but did you get a chance to like venture around that little neighborhood with a little path and the river and the that one amazing Georgian restaurant nearby, or did you just stay inside the hotel?
I did go down the path. There's a part where the path is actually glass. You can look through it. I was amazed. I had Asa in a wheelchair. All I could get was a normal-sized wheelchair like you would sit in or I would sit in, and I put my son in it, and he almost disappeared in the chair. But we went for a walk down the thing, but pretty much we stayed at the hotel.
Okay.
Things were going on, and I thought it was just wise to stay out of the way.
Sure. Makes sense.
I felt comfortable in the hotel. Actually, all 3 trips I've stayed in the Favorite Park.
Okay. It's a cute neighborhood is why I say that, because we actually ventured around a little bit. We didn't go far, maybe 5-block radius we ventured, but there's a beautiful grocery store, a wonderful Georgian restaurant. There's a park with kids like rollerblading and everybody's like hanging out and playing. And there's a little stream there. It's cute.
No, you're going to have to tell me where the grocery store is and the restaurant. I never found them.
Next time you go, let me know. I'll tell you. It's very, very close by.
Due to the limitations that ASA places upon me.
Sure.
And the fact that I don't know anything and can't speak the language, can't read the language. I just did the best that I could. I couldn't stay in the hotel all the time, but I probably didn't wander more than, a block away. Just enough that I could say that I got out. I went for a walk. It was a pleasant walk, and the people that I met along the way, everybody was friendly. They'd nod at you. I didn't try to have any conversations. I wish I had.
Well, I will say, forgive me for interrupting, but Ukrainians are such kind people, and they want to be so much a part of the Western culture, whether it be European or American, etc. And when you are a person from America, they gravitate towards you. They want to get to know you. They're curious. So just all I say is like, don't feel afraid to like, especially, use your own intuition. You're a smart man. You're a scientist. Use your intuition when approaching somebody, or if somebody approaches you. But 99% of the time, you're going to have a pleasant experience when speaking to a local. That's all I'm saying.
I got over that the second trip.
Okay, good. All right.
I was just being cautious, and I'm
Sure.
watching over Lisa. We had a good experience at the hotel. I noticed that during the time we were there, particularly during the breakfast buffet time, I'm obviously American, and I did field work, so all my life I've worn jeans and canvas shirts, so I'm obviously an American. I mean, for the first 12 years that I worked at my job, I was pretty much a field geologist. Then later I shifted to being an inspector, but with the geologist background, work that I did, I did a lot of cleaning up of petroleum releases. Everybody thinks of a gasoline station, but there's far more to it than that.
Okay, I'm going to stop you. Have you seen the Billy Bob Thornton show about the oil industry?
Landman?
Yes. Okay, so you're a geologist. Can I kindly ask you, what is your opinion after seeing that? Obviously, I know it's dramatized, but how much of it is kind of on the point?
A good bit.
Okay.
No, right. I've never been around a drill rig. Well, not that kind of drill rig. I was around drill rigs often. We're cleaning up messes. We're popping holes in the ground, but we're not drilling for oil.
Right.
Well, actually, we were drilling for oil. Things get released. Tanker trucks turn over.
Sure.
Gasoline tanks leak. I only covered 13 counties. There was a little bit over 600 facilities in my region, and that was what I did. My job was For the first 12 years, the only thing we did was just clean up existing messes. We cleaned up messes that had been lingering ever since World War II. After a while, we got most of the really nasty ones cleaned up, and then programs changed through time, and I ended up doing inspections a lot more of existing facilities and making sure that they met the regulatory requirements, that they were doing the appropriate testing and stuff like that. We popped holes, calculating the slope and the flow of groundwater, because nothing moves through the ground faster than groundwater does itself. We've got to figure out where the plume is going to, who's in the way, who's in danger. Mm-hmm. What is it that's moving? How is it going to change as it moves through the ground, as it interfaces with the matrix? Does it always become less dangerous? No, not necessarily. It can actually become more dangerous. Depends on the matrix and the chemical compound that's been released. And so I lived in that world. I only did it for 32 years, 7 years for the state of Florida, and 25 years for the state of Virginia.
Okay, wow. I'm going to kindly ask you, my friend, so all your years, essentially as a scientist, the term scientist, you don't need a degree to be a scientist. We are all scientists as humans. You agree? In many ways?
It's all about the approach.
About the approach. So,
yes, if you're using the scientific method, then you're a scientist.
I felt that way since a child, and I didn't understand what that meant until I learned what the scientific method was. And I realized, oh, gee, that's what I've been doing since I can remember, even though I was never taught that, right?
My job was to get people out of trouble. You give me a problem, and I'll show you anywhere from 5 to 8 different ways to address it. I don't think that there's just one way to solve a problem.
So I guess my question is, based on everything you told me, which is amazing, like to hear you talk about this, and I always enjoy speaking to people like yourself who believe in the scientific method, who is a scientist at heart, is like when you apply that to what you did for ASA and your decision to go this many times to Ukraine from 2020 to, I would love to hear your kind of parallel to your life experience to deciding to do this, and of course why you decided to keep going back.
They're running the best show. They really are. Now the thing is what they do is controversial, but I'm interested in effectiveness. We're talking about my son's life, and I'm not going to play politics with my son's life. I don't care what your politics are or what your religion is. I'm not going to abandon my son for someone else's beliefs.
Nor should you.
I don't see, there's no conflict with me. I have people sometimes tell me that, I'm wrong, I'm going to hell, and I sit there and just look at them and go, no, not really. I don't buy into that routine.
But I can tell because you and I have a similar nervous laugh. We both giggle and laugh when something feels uncomfortable. That's how I am. And I think that's a little bit how you are. But once we set aside the belief systems and you focus only on the science, and also, most importantly, Max, focus only on what you've seen with your child, Asa, that's what I want to hear, honestly. Why do you keep going back? Why do you keep going back?
Because it's effective, and I see the results.
Yeah.
And the thing is that my son's problem cannot be cured with a single trip. Each time I go back, I get a better result. So the effect is cumulative, and we keep building on that. When I was there, I looked at the doctor. She's a young woman. Well, she's younger than me. And the interpreter was there, and I looked at her and I said, this is what I'm here to do. I don't have your knowledge, your education, or experience. And I had the translator tell her that, which made her smile. And it would take me many years of study to even have a good foothold. Sometimes you have to rely upon the knowledge, experience, and education of other people. And I felt that I could rely upon them. And I know they're in business to do business, but they're also a scientifically based business. And they're offering an extremely valuable product. they're giving him a lot of shots. And my son's a real soldier when it comes to facing into medical treatment. He's had a difficult time in life. Of course, he screams when they stick the needles in him. I hold his head in his hands, and someone else was controlling his feet, and they gave him the shots into, subcutaneously into the abdomen. Of course, they fed a small bag about the size of the palm of your hand intravenously. Anytime we had a needle coming, we had Super Grover there to rescue the day.
That's great. That's great. After the first therapy, what did you notice after the first one that made you decide to say, okay, we're going to go back again and again and again?
My son started to speak.
Oh, okay. So this is really important, Max. So he never spoke before the first therapy?
Never.
Okay. Anyone that spent this much time on our conversation should hear this. So can you kindly describe to me, Max, pre-speak versus post-speak at this stage?
He was always able to say mama and papa.
Okay.
That he could get out. But that was the sum total of it. Mostly he would cry and, or laugh. And we kept him entertained, but he was pretty much, his personality was flat. If you know what I'm speaking on?
Yes, I do. Before the therapy.
Before the therapy.
Okay.
And actually, that didn't change a whole lot until the second therapy. Mm-hmm. The third therapy really cinched it.
I'm going to pause, Max. Forgive me for interrupting you. I hope I didn't. But this is what I've been noticing after following this for nearly a decade. In certain conditions, especially in the condition with ASA, is that while it's no guarantee, but sometimes it takes 1, 2, sometimes 3. Because the reason being is that each therapy builds upon the previous therapy. I've tried to help people understand this. The first round of cells go in, therapy number 1. They set the stage. Second round of therapy goes in, stage number 2. And in your case, third round of therapy, stage number 3, because each round of cells continue to build. And sometimes it takes that many times. And so each time you go, it tends to build on the last.
I agree with you. It does. It takes. See, the thing is it all depends on what your problem is.
Right. Of course.
It's whether one trip is going to do the trick. I'm trying to rebuild a central nervous system. I've seen the CT scans, the CAT scans on my son's brain, where they, it's like slices through the brain, the pictures are. I've seen when they reach that part of the brain that was affected, it's like a spider web there, where the nerves have died. When the nerves die, of course, they don't just die, they atrophy. Mm-hmm. When they die, they're replaced by glial cells. Well, the glial cells, I guess you could call it a glial scar in the brain. Now, new synapses in the axons cannot really cut through the glial scar. They've got to go around it in some form or manner. I am not a neurosurgeon. I'm a geologist. I'm doing the best I can. So I've got my son on a special diet to assist with this. He's taking uridine, GPC, which is a form of choline, and what's the other thing? Oh, yes. I give him these, it's like fish oil, but it's not from fish. It's actually from algae. And as I was looking through the thing, because, your brain is most highly composed of DHA. And if you look on the bottle of your fish oil, it says EPA and DHA. What I noticed was that if I got the vegetarian variety that is made from algae, it's the reverse of what you see in fish oil. In the fish oil, you'd say, I'm going to make up numbers because I don't have a bottle in front of me with the stuff on it. Let's say the EPA was at 250, so DHA would be like 180. But if you go to the vegetarian, form, which is from algae, the DHA is the higher of the two. So I wanted to make sure that he was getting as much DHA as possible, along with the uridine and the GPC. And what it does is it creates a favorable environment for the creation of new synapses. Now, he gets that every day, and he has now for 2 years. Does it work? I don't know. Does it hurt him? No. All medicine is dosed according to body weight, and that's exactly what I do. So, I have what you would call severe Crohn's disease.
You have Crohn's?
Yes. I've only had 3 small bowel resections.
Wait, can I stop you, Max? Max, you understand that MCell has huge results for Crohn's disease. You know that, right?
I'm a living testimony to it.
So you did get the therapy?
Yes, I did.
Oh, my gosh. See, so many times people take their children and go there.
So my son too.
So when you were there with your kid, Asa, your son, you got the therapy yourself, and the Crohn's reversed?
Yes.
Wow. So many people that email me and say, does it help with Crohn's disease? I'm saying, yeah, I heard it has. I've seen colonoscopies showing the Crohn's going away. I've never spoken to somebody, Max, that had Crohn's disease. Can you please talk about that for a minute, please?
Well, actually, I've had the 3 small bowel resections. I've lost my terminal ileum, ileocecal valve, my cecum, and I've lost my entire ascending colon. Well, it's gone. I have my transverse and descending colon still. Well, see, Crohn's disease is a progressive disease. There is no known cure. Okay. Even the stem cells are not a cure. This disease has no known cure. But the thing is the stem cells improved my situation. Now my doctor is desperate to find something wrong with me.
Isn't that fun?
Anyway, she's recently taken me, had me come in for a CT scan for my chest and my abdomen. Remember, I wrote to you when I got back from the first treatment. I told you I'd gone in, I'd gotten the stem cells for Crohn's. And then 2 months after I got back, 60 days, I came down with this terrible infection.
Yep.
They put me in the hospital. My wife, I came back, and when I walked into the house, I just collapsed. And my wife came over and put her hand on my phone. She said, "You have a fever." And so she took my temperature, and I was only running 105.
Okay.
She didn't know what to do with me. She took me to the bathroom and put me in the shower and cooled me off. Then she took me out, put me in the car, and drove me to the hospital. I was 8 days in the hospital. 60 days after I returned from Ukraine. I did not catch this in Ukraine. I caught this one.
Okay.
Anyway, then after 8 days in the hospital, they sent me over to a rehab center where I stayed for 2 weeks because I couldn't stand up and walk. So this last time, she was trying to find out something. She got a chest x-ray, and they found spots on my lungs. And, I have elevated white blood cell count. And they looked at me, "You have spots on your lungs, and you have elevated white blood cell count." And they were trying their best to send me off to...
Like an oncologist?
Yes.
Okay.
And so when they did that CT scan on my chest and my abdomen, it comes back. They looked at it. I have scar tissue in my lungs from that infection. During the time I was in the hospital, the nurses kept coming into my room and going, "You're 1%, you're 1%. I said, "What is 1%? And they never clarified that for me. I think I was expected to die.
I'm sorry, Max, 1% of what? They said we don't know what? And then they
would never clarify why they were making the comment. But anyway, I don't think people typically survive this, particularly people my age. Anyway, I attribute my survival to the fact that I'd had stem cells 60 days prior. I remember while they had me in that rehab center, and my whole abdomen was just tingling. I received all those cells. I think they were activating themselves. I don't know.
So you've had M cells therapy once yourself?
More than once.
So, okay, your child had it 4.
3 times in Ukraine.
Okay, forgive me. So 3 times for fetal stem cells with your child. So for you, can I kindly ask, like, only Ukraine, only fetal stem cells? Can you kindly share, like, how many times have you had it, and has Asa?
I've had it twice.
Okay.
The following year, when I took Asa back, I just went for the standard anti-aging. The third time we went back, I just treated Asa, not me.
Okay.
And we're going back this year, and I think I'm going to get another round of treatment for myself.
So what month are you thinking about going back this year?
September.
Okay.
I seem to have a thing for September and October. Ukraine winters are actually quite cold.
Yeah, they are.
And I sit here, I've got, on my cell phone, I keep up, I've got the time for Warsaw and for Kiev on my cell phone. I track the weather there, and I've noticed that the winters in Ukraine are pretty much like the winters here where I am. The difference is that they get more snow, but we have temperatures about the same. So I'm used to cold, but I didn't want to have to pack the heavy clothes. I'm pushing a wheelchair. I cannot be dragging a suitcase behind me. So I have a backpack suitcase, and I put that 50 pounds on my back, and I push my son in his wheelchair.
Yeah.
Now, I can walk a long ways with 50 pounds on my back. I've walked across major airports, but that's the way we travel. We backpack it. I got my son in front of me. If the backpack I start to wear down, I'll just hang the backpack off the handle on the back of the chair, give myself some time off, but I can't step away from the chair because it'll flip over backwards from the weight of the suitcase that's on my back.
I think a lot of people listening to this, not everyone, but people that are interested in learning about cerebral palsy, while we all know that it's not going to be the same for every person that decides to get this therapy for cerebral palsy, what can you say about your child Asa with this? And if you want to give advice, but Asa's only 9. A lot of people have cerebral palsy in their teens and they decide to go there. Like, what is your input on this?
Well, when I was originally looking into the matter, they told me that Asa has a time limit on him. And originally they told me I had from the time he was 2 years old to he was 6 years old to extract a change. But when I got to Ukraine and I was talking to the doctors there, they told me that that was not correct for their treatment. They told me that the window of opportunity is from the age of 3 to the age of 10. When did COVID happen?
2020, 2021.
Well, see, I could not travel with my son when COVID was on because he is small, and no airline would allow my son to board. So for 2 years, I was unable to go anywhere or do anything. The only thing I did was take care of my son and save my money. And once COVID became manageable, the Russians showed up. Well, I'm not going to let the Russians keep my son from having a doctor's appointment. And so I decided that I was going to take my son to Ukraine because there are no other options present on this planet that can accomplish what can be accomplished in Ukraine. I've looked. Lord knows I don't want to go to a nation that's in a war, but they are the only option that I could find that could actually achieve the goals that I have set. So I went where I needed to be. And taking risks, well, risk is a part of life, and you have to accept the risk if you want to achieve your goals. And I did it.
Yeah.
Oh, back when Asa was in November of 2016, my son caught the RSV virus. I took him to the local hospital. They sent him down to the closest children's hospital. On the 4th day I was there, the doctor came in, and they were having a lot of problems. And the doctor came into the room and looked at me and says, "We don't have the means to keep your son alive." Well, not every hospital has everything. So we med-flighted him over to Vanderbilt University Children's Hospital. And he was in the hospital there for 30 days. And then after he got out of there, we ended up in the hospital of the children's ward over at Roanoke. So I guess you could say he was in the hospital for 45 days. Anyway, it took a harsh toll on him. One of the doctors looked at me and says, what the RSV virus did to your son may be as devastating to him as the cerebral palsy. And so I took it as a challenge. And I proceeded to find, my wife used to fuss at me. She says, she'd get up and she goes, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Why are you still up? I says, I'm looking for information. Sitting here at this computer, everybody in the house went to bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock. And 5 hours later, I'm still sitting in front of the computer searching. And I did it for months. Everywhere I could look, anything I could find. And I did an extensive search and study. I listened to a lot of presentations. Everybody wants to sell their product, but you got to look through the salesmanship. And I found Ukraine. I don't know if there's another place in Ukraine that can come up with treatment that you can get it himself. I don't know.
I do know, and you can't. It's just these specific M-cell people since Chernobyl. They've been building it ever since.
You got to look through the salesmanship, the marketing. I've read everything that M-cell has, and I didn't find it adequate. I wish they had more publications. I ran across some of your productions where you were giving out more information about their protocols, their research, their, advancements than I was actually getting from their website. I have to tell you this, you're one hell of a representative. Life involves risk, and I'm willing to roll the dice. I'm hoping that there will be someone out there that will draw benefit.
That's the whole point of this, is that somebody else in your situation hears it. That's why I do it.
I've looked at the other children and that I've seen around here that are in similar situations to Asa, and he is not like any of them. This has changed him considerably. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to continue doing what I do.
So when you say speaking, as you said, he would say mama, dada, etc. Like, what do you mean by he's speaking now?
Would you like to hear his talk? I'm going to get him, see what we can do. He's into mimicry. And sometimes we can break through the autism. He'll actually speak in sentences. Hey, goodness gracious me. It's my Asa, don't you see? Say hello, Harry.
Hello, Asa.
Whatever you say to him, he'll say back to you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Asa.
Oh, Asa.
Are you looking at Stephen Colbert?
Yeah. I want to say hello too.
Okay.
Hey.
Hey.
What's up, bro?
What's up, bro?
Hey, I got something for you.
You have something for me?
Don't do that.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Lately he thinks that's the cool thing to do. Well, I've got to go. I'm like you. I've got a bunch of things to do.
Okay.
As soon as I can get them straightened away, then I've got to go out and mow the yard. I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
As did I, Max. That was episode 23 of the God Cells podcast. As always, you can reach out to me at eric@ericmerola.com. That's ERIC at ERICMEROLA.com. You can find my website at ericmerola.com or this movie series website at stemcellsmovie.com. Until next time, I'm Eric Merola.